Well, Dr. Kobi Kambon, a.k.a. Joseph Baldwin, is, of course, came to Chicago back in the early 60s, is that correct?
61.
And was a part of the community with us, worked part-time at the Center for Inner City Studies, worked with Bobby Wright and others. And he, of course, went off to Florida A&M and stayed there for all this time and mentored a whole group of young people who have come along in his stead and have, made quite a representation for himself. And he, of course, is being presented by the community on the 26th, that is Saturday the 26th, at Center for Inner City Studies, 700 East Oakwood Boulevard. And we're asking that you come out, 700 East Oakwood Boulevard. It's at 11 o'clock, and he'll make a presentation on his book, which is quite a very, very good book on the whole issue of African American psychology.
In the interview, African Consciousness, True or False, on the H30 Art of Life show, legendary black psychologist Dr. Kobi Kambon was first asked to elaborate on his statement that the key to African people's problems is psychological in nature. He responded by recounting on his personal interaction with historian Dr. Chancellor Williams, who originally asserted that the root of African people's struggle lies in the mind. Dr. Kambon explained that centuries of oppression, dehumanization, and social engineering under global white supremacy have profoundly damaged the collective psyche of African people. This psychological assault, he argued, created internalized self-hatred and disconnection from African-centered identity. To achieve true liberation, African people must first come to understand what has been done to them psychologically, because no amount of political or economic change can succeed without a healed or reoriented mind. Dr. Kambon described this psychological damage as the most critical experience in African diasporic history. The transatlantic enslavement process and colonial domination did not only strip Africans of their land and labor, but also systematically reprogrammed their sense of self. He stated that Africans were programmed to fail by being conditioned to accept and internalize inferiority. This reprogramming continues through modern systems, schools, media, religion, and economics that reinforce white supremacy as the global standard for humanity. According to Dr. Kambon, what we see as the degenerate or self-destructive behavior patterns within African communities are actually symptoms of this long-term psychological manipulation. The mind of the African, he emphasized, is still under attack, yet many do not recognize the importance of fighting for their own mental and cultural freedom.
Well, now I can ask my questions. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to pose a lot of questions at the same time. And then I want to let you just deal with them in whatever order you think they belong. And then if you forget any, I'll bring it back up. Okay. Is that fair? Okay. All right. You have said the key to African people's problems is psychological in nature. So I'm going to want you to elaborate on that, if you will. Okay. You have said that you have talked about, and I'm not going to name it, but you have talked about what you call the most critical experience in African diasporan history. The most critical experience. I want you to talk about that. You also have said information is the foundation for armament. See, I like those things. I'm really fond of those. And I think I'll let those three go, and then I'll let you just do whatever you like with those. And then if you miss any stuff I want you to repeat, then I'll tell you and we'll go back in.
Okay.
Okay.
You can hold me to it. I may forget, but bring me back on pace. First of all, it's a pleasure to be back in Chicago. Chicago is my second home, and so I'm delighted to be back and to be on the show and to be able to give back to Chicago, because Chicago gave me so much when I was a young, developing intellectual. Uh, in terms of my work, what was the first question again?
The key to African people's problems is psychological in
Absolutely.
nature.
Yes. In 1983, while I served as the national president of the Association of Black Psychologists, our guest speaker for our convention that year in D.C. was the eminent late Dr. Chancellor Williams. And so I had the great honor of sharing the podium with him and discoursing with him, you know, and it was just a special experience and honor for me. At that convention, we had invited him to speak, and he had not been taking a lot of requests for speaking because he had glaucoma and some other medical challenges at that time in his life, and he was very selective about what he accepted. But he told us from the podium that once he got the invitation from the Association of Black Psychologists, he was compelled to get off of his sick bed and to come and give us our charge. Because he said of all of his studying of the history of African people, it was clear to him that one of the key issues came down to the psychology of African people and how that psychology was being oppressed or misused or redefined by the enemies of African people. So I'm just really echoing one of the great sages of our people and certainly of our history when I say that when you look at the conditions of our people, that we behave in a way that is not affirming, not racially or culturally affirming. As a matter of fact, we behave in ways that are anti-African, that are anti-black. And so clearly there's something wrong with the psychological orientation of black people or African descent people under this condition of oppression. And so if we're going to mount a liberation struggle, if we're going to transform our condition to one of empowerment from disempowerment, then it's clear that we're going to need some understanding of the psychological dynamics of what is happening to African people so that we can gain control over those forces and utilize them in a way that affirms our people. So I'm blessed to have been chosen by the ancestors to be a student of psychology, and it's exciting to try to create paradigms that will serve the liberation of our people in the discipline of psychology. So I think it's clear that when a group of people, a race of people, behave in a way that is not affirming, that is not empowering, then surely we have to begin. Something is wrong with their mind. Something is wrong mentally. Something is wrong in the psychological orientation of those people.
Well, you know, you mentioned Chancellor Williams, and I noticed that you hung out with the right people, because you had also mentioned in one of your presentations Bobby E. Wright.
Absolutely.
And Bobby E. Wright came up with a very classic term called Mentacide, in which he said, well, of course, you and I and many of us understand that the battle is for the African mind, that everybody wants the African mind, apparently, but the African himself, who is not seemingly unaware that his mind is being stolen. So we have had every single African-centered scholar, such as yourself, go to that at some point, no matter what they're writing about. At some point they go in and they try to give it a name. John Henry Clark called it cultural disruption, but he was still talking about psychology. Bobby Wright, Mentacide. So everybody, Kiara Cheatwood called it self-hatred. Everybody has had to address that, couldn't tell our story without visiting the problems, the psychological problems that we have.
In my work, I've adopted this construct I call cultural misorientation as a way to operationalize what I think is taking place with our people in terms of our psychological orientation. And it simply addresses the fact that African people have a cultural orientation, but it's incorrect. We have a cultural orientation because the institutions of this society foster it, the orientation that we operate according to. That orientation is destroying black people. But
attributes of that orientation, please.
I call it the European worldview that we have internalized as our natural and normal worldview. Because the infrastructure of the society reinforces it. So we're reinforced for acting and thinking and feeling like we're Caucasians, because the institutions again endorse that for black people. And I think that, but what happens is, so we're really in a conflict as to what do we do to affirm ourselves, because we have a basic natural need to do so. But the only tools that we have consciously are the tools that have been really generated on us by our oppression. And so those tools will never respond to that question. They will only get us deeper in the mire of our oppression.
When you talk about psychology being a road to the liberation of African people, you're not talking about the psychology of Freud and
Absolutely
Jung.
not.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Talking
about the psychology of Wright and Kambon and others.
Right.
One of the things that you said, one of the examples that you gave that I think is just so powerful, is that you said that some of us spend 10 hours in the morning getting ready to go out. 10 hours transforming ourselves into something, well, you didn't call it un-African, but I would choose to use that. Something as un and non-African as possible in order to go out to meet the world. We see now that we prefer everything artificial to the things that are naturally ours. We prefer other people's hair, other people's nails, other people's skin color, other people's body physique. We just seem to disown our natural selves. We don't honor it, we don't affirm it. And this is part of what you're talking about when self-affirming our behavior is, and we don't recognize it as that.
That's what makes it so dangerous, so lethal. The subtitle of one of my books, I call it Cultural Misorientation, the Greatest Threat to the Survival of the Black Race in the 21st Century. And the reason why it's such a potent force is because it goes unrecognized as disorder. We see it as normal, even though it's not providing us with the satisfaction of empowerment and affirmation. But we see it as that's the only reality that we know, that we're cognizant of. And so we see it as normal to get up early, to spend all that time to transform ourselves, because it undermines our self-confidence as black people. It undermines our self-esteem as black people. You see, it undermines all those things. So we have to do this transformation every day before we get out, trying to make ourselves as presentable to the European worldview as it requires of us, so that we can feel comfortable as we navigate through life, you know, and feeling good about ourselves.
And we're making Europeans feel more superior than they already do.
Oh, well.
Because if we're emulating them, you know, the first time I saw someone with a contact lens of a different eye color, I was so startled because I thought, why? You know, what is the purpose and what is the need to change your eye color?
Cultural misorientation means that we, black people, perpetuate white supremacy domination in the black community. We perpetuate it. You see, it becomes a
And if they stop tomorrow, it would still continue because we are perpetuating it.
Well,
if they tomorrow decided that they didn't want to be racist anymore and they just wanted to be natural people like you know, human beings are, we would still continue. I think you're right too.
Unless there would be institutional forces designed to re-Africanize us, or to transform us into the African-centered beings that we naturally should be, then certainly we will continue.
That's scary.
I mean, in terms of behavior, the institutions around us foster behavior. They represent the stimulus field that controls behavior, that defines behavior. And so, if we don't change the institution infrastructure around us and transform it to an African-centered infrastructure, then
where's the impetus going to come from to make us want to change the institutions if we don't want to change ourselves?
Well, and
if you want to be, if you want to continue to be this pseudo European, you know, with all the attributes of Europeanness that you can manage, then why would this personality seek to put itself in an environment that's anti this personality? I can't see that would work.
Well, I think that, something I'll be talking about tomorrow when we talk about what I call preventive interventions, or creating African-centered preventive interventions for cultural misorientation, is that we have to have information is powerful. Information controls, what we do and what we think.
Right.
And so if we African people behave in a way that's anti-African, because that's the information that the institutions bring to us. And so we have to change the information. We have to change the content of the information. And so once we change that to an affirming, and we have to bombard our people with it on all levels, all institutional levels, with African-centered information. That what I'm trying to do in the Cultural Misorientation book is to confront us with this contorted image of an African. Do we look in the mirror? I want us to look in the mirror and see, do we like what we see? Because the institutions of American society don't show us that picture. See, they show us this picture that says it is consistent with, it's congruent with what we should be. Even if we're disappointed, if we're frustrated, then it's because there's a deficiency inside of us. And we need to work hard, maybe get up 2 hours earlier than the 2 hours we're already getting up at. And maybe we can do a little more, we need to do more work on ourselves to transform ourselves.
And we've been taught to believe that in order to get over, to be successful in society, we have to be Europeanized. And that Africanness is negative and non-rewarding in this society.
And
look at the fights.
Punishable.
Exactly.
Because it's not just unrewarding.
It's
there's penalties.
And another part of my work is certainly to follow up on Bobby Wright's work on the psychopathic race of personality, Francis Welsing's work on white supremacy, this genetic survival motivation that they operated on. I think that is to confront our people with that knowledge base. This is what Caucasian psychology is. This is what it consists of. It's not this rosy picture, this distorted picture, this delusional picture that you're being painted by the institutions of society. This is that's why we have to go back and study our history and their history as psychologists, so that we can then construct the paradigm, the picture of the psychology that we're really confronted with, because we are miseducated and brainwashed to be so naive about the psychology of Caucasianism. I mean, black people who can't even control their own homes or their own neighborhood are thinking they can transform white supremacy. You see, and we can't even transform ourselves. You see, we can't. And so I think that it's very critical that we be confronted with this contorted image, this psychological oppression. That we have articulated before us what are the processes in this cycle. How do they do it to us? And many of us know they brainwash, but we don't see the processes. How do they do it? And then what are our alternatives? What is our cultural alternative? That's why we study our ancient history, and right up to the present, so we can find out what are we supposed to be like then. If we're not supposed to be like this, this doesn't lead us to the kind of human satisfaction that we desire. Then what is the African alternative? And so we have to do these things simultaneously as a part of this, what I call preventive, African-centered preventive intervention to address cultural misorientation, Mentacide, etc.
Can we try simultaneously? I'll just invent me a new word, because you're talking about the institutions, managing the institutions, controlling their impact on us. But then I'm looking at the closest people to our young people are people in their homes and in their neighborhoods.
Absolutely.
And it would seem to me that if auntie and mama weren't wearing false hair and false
Blue
amount of
eyes.
other things, that maybe the young people wouldn't maybe aspire to those standards, so that there's got to be some work going on in the family and in the community, some images that are admirable images, that are attractive images, that we present ourselves, and not, because we may be a while manipulating in a whole institution, but we ought to be able to get some stuff going on, in our families. I remember when the miniskirt came out, I thought that was a nice, cute fashion. I went out and bought one. My husband wouldn't let me wear it. Well, somebody had some sense. He just knew that his wife was not supposed to be marching around, with half of her body exposed to the world. But most people didn't make judgments like that. So somebody, father has to say to the daughter, mother has to say to the daughter, parents have to say to children, husbands have to say to wives, wives have to say to husbands, some things that may be not complimentary. They, you know, but if we, as long as we are congratulating and praising people for disfiguring themselves in order to seek a persona that not only is not better in any sense, is not more attractive, not better looking, and in fact, some of the things that people have to do in order to achieve the appearance are actually detrimental. I mean, some of the chemicals that there's a whole book about the chemicals that women use on their hair that it causes all kinds of havoc in the physical body. So that, you know, we got to reach some people that we know. You know, not some folks running some institution somewhere, even though those are people, they that can be left unaddressed because that's where the people we know got a lot of what it is that they do.
Well, alluding back to Dr. Williams' charge to the Association of Black Psychologists, we have to have training programs for psychologists to create African-centered psychologists who are able to go out and change the mental health policy in the black community.
Okay.
You see, to create new standards about mental health, what mental health should consist of black people. Then you have some guidelines you see that you can apply to families, that human services agencies now are in a position to apply these guidelines to families, to re-educate, re-socialize our families to an African-centered,
Bobby, you
culture reality. And so
I forgot about you. You are a descendant of Bobby Wright.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you working on that social theory thing.
But it's so critical. It's in terms of how we define the environment around our people. And so, but we got to have psychologists. We've got to have trained more African-centered psychologists to change the social policy for mental health and quality of life in the black community. And I think then our parents have resources to draw upon to do that. But you're absolutely right. That if we have culturally misoriented parents, then all they can generate are culturally misoriented children. And so there's no way we can peel that apple any other way. Yet, and so what we have to do then, how do we introduce new information, African-centered information, into our community? One way is through an African-centered mental health agenda, but also through education.
What
we
about
call independent black schools.
Central to Dr. Kambon's analysis is the concept of cultural misorientation, a term he developed to describe how African people have been oriented to think, feel, and behave according to European values rather than African ones. Because this orientation was imposed by white supremacist forces, Africans have learned to mistrust themselves and to imitate their oppressors. This cultural dislocation leads to confusion, disunity, and self-destructive choices. Dr. Kambon warned that many African-descended people have learned to affirm white culture more than their own, and even take pride in assimilation through code switching and the pursuit of whiteness as the ultimate social goal. As a result, African people are often more comfortable living as cogs in the machinery of white supremacy than building systems rooted in their own cultural worldview. When Dr. Kambon spoke of psychology as a tool for black liberation, he made it clear that he was not referring to Western psychology, which he saw as a discipline rooted in white supremacy. Instead, he emphasized the need for African psychology of African liberation, a psychology developed by African people, grounded in African values, spirituality, and communal relationships. This African-centered psychology seeks to heal the mental fractures caused by centuries of oppression and to restore African people to their natural state of self-consciousness and cultural wholeness. Reorientation within an African framework, he said, requires rewriting the brain, replacing destructive Western programming with an African-centered worldview designed for the survival and upliftment of African people. In closing, Dr. Kambon emphasized that information is the foundation for African armament, meaning that knowledge, particularly knowledge of self, is the most powerful weapon in the struggle for liberation. He reminded the audience that his own work is just one piece of a much larger puzzle being assembled by generations of African psychologists, scholars, and freedom fighters. Liberation, he concluded, has never been pretty. It is bloody, ugly, but necessary. True African consciousness, in Dr. Kambon's view, requires a complete mental and cultural transformation. Only when Africans reclaim their minds and reestablish their worldview on African terms, they can begin to free themselves from the psychological chains of white supremacy and build a future defined by self-determination and collective power.